the NFL stands for not for long.
Set, Sharga and Armstead. Roll out, Walker still running out. Looks to the left, wide open, Thompson touchdown. Colin Thompson with the touchdown. There was nobody within 20 yards of him.
What a catch off the bobble. Colin Thompson scoops it up.
Lofton corner the end zone. It is caught for the touchdown. The first NFL touch for Colin Thompson is a score.
Too many words are left to say, so they get left behind.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another edition of the Colin Thompson Show, brought to you by Not For Long Media. Everything we do at Not For Long Media is brought to you by our friends over at the original Fudge Kitchen, shipping fudge and sweet treats across the country. We got a packed house again this week. Earlier this week, we had Paul Swan of Austin Dillon's NASCAR pit crew team, an absolute nut job on my podcast. So check that out if you're into NASCAR, even if you're not, into a good laugh. Paul's got great stories. And then I got a litany of hosts joining us today. We'll start with the great Jason Myrtetus. How you doing, Jason?
What's going on, man? Good to be here. It's the NHL offseason. A lot of people, like, you're a pro athlete, like, love the offseason. I hate the offseason. I am miserable in the offseason. I know you guys have played, and you got to let the body heal and the emotion and mental and all that crap. I hate the offseason because I need the grind of the 82 and the whole thing. So I'm slightly miserable now, or slightly more miserable than normal, but we'll survive.
Yeah, Jason is the host of the Flyers Daily podcast, does a ton with the team, very intertwined with what they do. We're going to get into that in a little bit here. Trevor Harris from the Upper Bowl podcast does a little bit of everything with radio and TV, and I met him through the legendary Tony Bruno, so I don't know if that's a good thing. Trevor, how you doing, pal?
I'm doing great. Just worked the Miami Heat New York Knicks game last night, game 4, which was an absolute barn burner of a blowout. The vibes are well, and then the vibes are well anyway. So because of,
I don't hate the
Florida
NBA playoffs, Har. I hate the hype. You come via Tony Bruno, man. That's the stamp of approval, man.
And I'll say it again. We've talked about it a million times here, and my Wi-Fi is going, and everyone's dipping in and out here. Is the thing about this? There's going to be blowouts in the NBA. There's going to be blowout in the NHL. It's how it goes. But there's fight, or there's going to be fights in an NHL playoff game if things go awry. That's just fact. The NBA is like, let's pull the guys, save their legs, or let's try to come back, and it never happens. So I'm just not interested in that. So, but I am interested in this. The great Dilfy Dan, everybody calls him around here. Dan Brown, man down. Dan Brown is what I called him when I played with him with the Bears. Recently retired NFL tight end. Dan, how you doing today? How was pickup basketball?
It was great. I'm glad to be back 2 weeks in a row after not even getting on for the first. I don't know how long you've had this show, but I couldn't get on once. Now I'm on it for 2 weeks in a row. It's great.
Going on 7 years, Dan.
Yeah, so second time in 7 years. Basketball was great this morning over at Navy. Better than last week. We're getting better.
Okay, the jumper's coming back.
We knocked some jump shots down today. It's good.
That's good, Dan. Yeah, Dan plays pickup basketball with some of my friends over at Navy. I am still playing, or at least trying to still play, so I do not touch a basketball because that is the kiss of death for me. Lots to talk about. Shout out to our friends at Shots and Giggles in Key West, the best bar in Key West. Everything we do is brought to you by them as well. NHL Draft was last night. NHL playoffs are going on. And first off, Jason, why does the NHL schedule it like this? Because it's the mecca of NHL. It'd be like putting the NBA, the NFL draft or lottery situation, if we had one, in the middle of the best time of year for the NFL playoffs. Why does it even happen? Like, the ratings just get squashed. Like the NFL schedule release will be bigger. Like, why don't they section this out here where it's like a normal process through this?
Well, the commissioner in the NFL could fart and it'd be bigger news than anything in the NHL. Let's just be honest about it. When he's given one of those bro hugs at the draft, which get really uncomfortable. But no, I think they do it because it gets all of the other markets that are not involved in the playoffs, the 16 non-playoff markets involved. And they also need to give the teams time because the draft happens like right after the cup is handed out. It's June 28th. Cup will probably be handed out, I think, around the 15th or 16th, depending how many games the final goes, which I think starts on June 3rd. So you got to give the teams time to get their draft board in order, because there's a lot of moving parts, because you just don't know where you're going to draft because of the lottery. Now, only 2 teams can really move up now in the lottery reform that they have, and you can only move up a maximum of 10 spots. So, had Ottawa last night won one of those drawings, they would have moved up to number 2, because they couldn't move up the one. They would have kept their pick as well, because it would have been, it's top 5 protected, but they lose it to Arizona because it landed beyond the top 5. But it's just a way to get those other markets involved. And when you've got, a player like Connor Bedard on the line, and you see, you're watching the playoffs and you see Austin Matthews, the number 1 overall pick, Tavares is a number 1 overall pick, and then Connor McDavid's the number 1 overall pick, and Draisaitl's a 3rd overall pick. And you see these guys just, how great they are. There's a lot of excitement about where that guy's going to go, because not only is he going to change kind of the trajectory of a franchise on the ice, but he changes everything. He changes, their stature in their market, in their sports market. He changes their stature in the league that they're in. They become, more compelling a team to watch on national television. He makes everybody more money, bars, everything, because he's a spectacle. They sold a ton of season tickets last night. Now, that said, he's going to Chicago. Good market for him, good market for the NHL. But Chicago's going to stink out loud. I mean, they're going to be horrible. They stripped it down as bare as you can get this past year to suck on purpose. And they had the second best odds to land them, and it worked out for them. But, by no means is getting a generational player a ticket to a Stanley Cup, because it's not true. It just doesn't happen. I mean, the Edmonton Oilers have won 3 playoff series. They had 4 number 1 overall picks in 6 years. And they have Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl. They got 3rd, and they've won 3 playoff series since 2010. So it's not it's a team sport. So it's an exciting night, but Flyers missed out on them, but they'll pick at 7.
Yeah, lots of unpack there.
Huh?
That's really good. It's a lot to unpack there. I'll go right back to you, Jason, again. The Flyers. Okay. I'm devastated. I know he's not the answer to long-term success, but at least a short-term excitement would be the answer, what he would be. 7th is still a good spot to pick. Lots of great players. I've gone in the top 10. The draft is an unproven science, as we all know, for those listening in football. And Dan was technically a rookie minicamp tryout, which is the lowest of the lows. I was an undrafted tryout, which is the next level up, and then 7th round picks, etc. They make it. Dan played 7 years in the league. I digress. Jason, it's a roundabout me asking you, if you're the GM for the Flyers, what is the quickest way and the best way to do this thing and turn it around? Because it is the dumpster fire and is the lowest. I mean, the Flyers are at the bottom of professional sports right now.
They're actually not. I mean, they're not even close to the bottom of the NHL. To be honest, I mean, you look at.
I know, but the future, there's no direction. It's just
Well, that's the big thing right now. I mean, they fired Chuck Fletcher, the general manager, who came in after they fired Hextall, and it was flip flopping directions. So you got to figure out where you're going and how you're going to get there, and you got to realize that in pro sports, even if you win a draft lottery, there is no microwaving. You can't just pop it in the microwave. When you microwave food, it tastes like you microwave food. When you try and do that building a roster in pro sports, it looks like a roster that was microwaved. So you have to be patient. You have to stick to it. They have a lot of pieces, oddly enough. They have a lot of things that, a team like Toronto doesn't have. They have tremendous depth, but they don't have the star power. And, what's harder to get? The depth when you're paying 4 guys $60 million, or is it harder to get the high-end talent? That's what they got to figure out. They got to land a player in this draft at 7. It's a really good draft. There'll be some good guys there. Dvorsky could be there. He's a guy that I think can really move the needle. There's some other good players and difference makers that could be there. I mean, you look at the NHL. I mean, like I look at these teams that have drafted at the top. Like Florida didn't draft David Ekblad. He's a number 1 overall pick, but other than that, they're not drafted at the top of the draft. I look at teams like Carolina. Sebastian Aho was taken 25th. I mean, he's their best player. You look at teams like the Maple Leafs, they drafted at the top. They've won 1 playoff series since 2004. And so, you got to build a team. And the way to do that is to have a vision, stick to it. And for Danny Briere, first-time GM, like this offseason is really important, because every other GM in the league is going to come with their hand out going, I'm here to help you. Meanwhile, they're there to stab you right in the back and get one over on you. So those first round of deals that you make as a GM, I think are really important. You can't get pushed around in the market at all. You have to have a cutoff point. You can't just say, I'm going to do whatever to get rid of this guy. There has to be a tipping point to it. So, whether Danny's going to be a good GM, I don't know. I genuinely like him. He's the best athlete I've ever covered in my 28 years in the business. He knows the game, but it's going to be the proof is in the pudding. He's got to execute and build a roster and, know the pieces that it's time to move out that have value to get something in return, and know how to find talent where you traditionally don't find it, like the Tampa Bay Lightning did with Braden Point in the third round or Nikita Kucherov in the second round. That's what you got to do. That's what it takes.
Yeah, Tampa and a team like Boston too that got hot in the, with a draft that really saved them. Not to get too down that rabbit, so where am I going with this? Too down that rabbit hole. Excuse me, Colin. There was the drafts are huge. They're massive, and one draft can turn around your entire franchise.
And they didn't draft at the top of the draft.
No.
Well, I did a ton of research today. Boston. Let me go to my Boston page here. They have the highest winning percentage since 2006 in the NHL. Boston does, right? So their winning percentage since 2006, basically the reform of the lottery, is 635 points percentage. Number one in the league. The highest draft pick they had in that time, they had Tyler Seguin, number 2 overall. They traded him. They had Dougie Hamilton 9th. He's not there anymore. But they drafted David Pastrnak 25th in 2014. They drafted Charlie McAvoy 14th in 2016. Those are the pieces. That's how you build a team. And you can pay everybody, but not a ton of money.
Yeah, no, that's good
that's
stuff
the key.
there.
No top draft picks on that team.
No doubt. And it's going to be up to Danny to, sift through all that and who's around him. That's, that's another question. And Trevor, you're down in Florida there. You
Yes.
watch everything the Panthers are doing. You're heavily involved with, different shows and producing it and watching it. And you talk about it on your show a lot too. Boston, best team in the history of the NHL in the regular season. A great 7-game
worst team ever.
Yeah. And then you see Toronto and you're like, oh boy, here you go. Toronto's getting hot. They made it out of the first round for the first time in 19 years. And your Florida Panthers have been dominant. What's the buzz down there in South Florida?
It's been the buzz has been remarkable. It's like almost people are like, holy Christ, we have a good hockey team. And like the Leaf fans that we came down this weekend, they were like shocked how many more Panther fans were there, because it's usually a Leaf home game whenever they come. So it's a lot of fun. But Kachuk's a star. He's the number one talk of the town down here. People have been criticized Barkov during the first round, and he finally showed up. And it's like all the role pieces have finally showed up. Like Sam Bennett's been showing up. He's been doing well in the playoffs. Carter Verhaeghe, who they got from Toronto/Tampa Bay, who's been a steal of a free agent, by the way. He's like, his number is going to get retired in the rafters. It's pretty remarkable how much South Florida is becoming a hockey town, because it's like when you look at it mostly during the wintertime, it's usually like, what are the Miami Heat doing? But now it's like, oh, we have 2 legitimate winter sports teams down here. Like the Panthers are to me, they're the talk of the town anyways. So
yeah, they have a chance to sweep tonight, filming on May 9th. So it's going to be, I can't wait to watch the game. I hope they sweep. I love all the drama and the parody and fun. I think Dan's got a really cool story. Not a hockey guy. He's a Virginia guy. But he's got a good hockey story, though.
There wasn't a lot of hockey in my area, so I didn't grow up really watching hockey, following hockey. But I do think playoff hockey games are second to none. I mean, the crowd the atmosphere is electric. So when I was with my time with the Jets, we had been invited by the Islanders to see their playoff game. They actually invited us to game 3, and then they came back for game 5. We got invited again, and they set us up. We got bussed over there with a bunch of us, and we ended up hanging out with the boys at Barstool. Frankie Borelli and Stu and all those guys had us over at their restaurant, and then grabbed beers with them, and then we bussed over to the stadium, and the Islanders hooked us up. They got us all customized jerseys with our names and numbers. The wives and girlfriends got same jerseys. We had full access to the club suite that was like basically underground behind everything. All you could eat, all you could drink. I mean, I was sticking every single pocket had a Bud Light in it. So I was walking around, 2 in the hand, 2 in the back pocket, 2 in the front. I had 6 beers going back to my seat, and everybody, like, not a care in the world. We had our own little section right by the glass. There was a couple other celebrities in that section, but the atmosphere was absolutely electric. And, it was a blast for someone who doesn't really watch a ton of hockey. I think it's an amazing thing to go to.
Was that on the island or was that at Barclays?
It was in the island.
Oh, so it was at the old building too. That was a crazy atmosphere.
That was in 2021. Yeah.
Yeah, that was nuts. That was like pandemic was lifted and like fans were in the stands and going freaking bananas again. It was awesome. Yeah.
Now this is more of a question for Jason. Yeah, this is good for Jason. The best environment in hockey, in your opinion, and then maybe a story or your favorite, Flyers chaos arena memory.
They actually both coincide. They happened at the same arena. It was 2010 in the conference finals when the Flyers were in Montreal. I mean, you go to a game at the Bell Center. I mean, it's like going to Europe, going to Montreal, right? I've never been to Europe, so people tell me that. But it's just an unbelievable atmosphere up there. It's late May. It's warm actually in Quebec, and my hotel was like a block and a half from the Bell Center, the Chateau Champlain. So we're at game 3. The Flyers had home ice as a 7 seed because Montreal upset Washington. So they won the first 2 games at home. Then they went to Montreal for game 3. And the locker room there is across the ice from the bench. So the Canadians have the whole side that's bench side of locker rooms. And then across the ice is where the Flyers locker room is. And that's actually where the backup goalie sits too. There's not enough room on the bench. So he sits across the ice. So I was down there. That's where I was set up to do, pregame intermissions and everything, in that there's like a hallway and then the locker rooms. And I was set up in that hallway right by the coach's office. And in the first period of that game 3, and Montreal, Toronto, these teams are all notorious for when visiting teams come in, is finding ways to totally fuck with them and, crank up the heat in the locker room, the games that they kind of play, those things. So players kept coming off the ice. I'm standing with Johan Backlund, who was the backup goalie in that little tunnel, and players kept coming off and getting a stone to stone their skates because they were losing an edge. So we come to find out one of the trainers or something, like rubbed the floor. It wasn't the rubber floor. It was like the carpet, and sand came up. Like you rub it and you see like sand popping up, and sand on a skate blade is the worst thing in the world. So they put sand down to screw up the Flyers skates in Montreal. Now Flyers lost that game. They won game 4, came back and won it in 5, but we had to put all these like huge pieces of cardboard down. So when they went off the ice for intermissions, they weren't walking on the sand again to screw up the edge on their skates. True story.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's amazing. Now, Dan,
the atmosphere there is unbelievable too. Like that's the temple of hockey, right? Like the buildings in Canada are like old school American buildings where they're really steep. So like you walk in the press box there and there's actually stands behind you, and it's like a wall of fans are just on top of you. And it's just, the anthem is in French and English, and the whole presentation and all the history of all the cups that were won there and in Montreal. It was awesome. It's a great place to visit.
Sports outside of the country are such a breath of fresh air, at least for the one that I've experienced. I went to the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium this past spring, and it was just incredible. Like just the pageantry and how they do business and how they allow, you can't drink in your seat, but they encourage people to come into the stadium. Like people are there 4 or 5 hours before drinking, and then they're after 2-3 hours. Like they're giving an open bottle of wine as people are leaving for the entire section and enjoy wine and cheese. It's like a whole different. It's just unique, right?
It's not as uptight as we are.
No, it's much different of like, get in, get out, get home, beat the traffic. Like it's just a whole different.
It's not a powder keg.
No, Dan, and you talked about arena, as Jason was mentioned, a tough place to play. I know playing anywhere in Canada is tough. Even a small market like Winnipeg. Toughest places, loudest places you played in there, Daniel?
A night game, Thursday night game in Baltimore was a tough place. I know there was a lot of hype. It was the 2018 or 2019. Lamar Jackson was taking the league by storm. They were good. They were rolling. They were probably the favorites in the AFC at that point. That was a night game in Baltimore was tough when they're winning. Kansas City rocks. It can get loud in Kansas City. There's not a lot to do there. So those people live, breathe, and die in Kansas City football. So, but I think
Lambeau?
I did play at Lambeau, but I always thought that Lambeau was just overall experience was just the funnest place to be. I didn't think it was a tough place to play. I mean, it gets loud, it's old school, but it was just. I just remember walking my first year in Chicago, walking into Lambeau and thought it was like I don't know, it was almost like a fairy tale. It was like the greenest grass I'd ever seen, the nicest. I laid down on the grass and like just laid down on it while we were stretching because it was the nicest grass I'd ever seen. There's so much history there. It's old school, but I enjoyed the experience of Lambeau Field. I didn't feel like it was like a extremely hard place to play. I think it was a cool experience.
So you weren't there like when it was like minus 40 degrees, like on the frozen tundra.
we always, for some reason, my time there, we always opened like the first quarter of the season in Green Bay, and we always had Green Bay in Chicago late in the season. Where my first year in Chicago, we caught Green Bay week 16, -8 wind chill at kickoff. It was tough.
Ooh. That's rough. Sorry, my dog is. That's the shotgun going off back here is my dog's bone dropping off. So trying to get there to calm down. Yeah, it's interesting too. And I saw the NFL schedule releases coming up here, and I want to kick it to Trevor as a fan, and then I want to kick it to Dan. Yes. But first, for me, when I look at the schedule, and I want to see Dan's thoughts here after I talk to Trev, is how many non-state income tax states we're playing in that year. Are you playing in a really cold environment late in the year, which it doesn't matter, but it's just what you look at. When's the bye week? When's the Thursday night football? Did I miss anything, Dan? I'll go to you first.
I look at turf versus grass.
So do I. Yes, it's a good point.
Because being in the AFC East, it was I remember in 2020, out of a 16-game schedule, we play on turf 14 times.
Oh,
rough.
Nightmare.
Yes.
It's a nightmare. It's a nightmare. I don't truly think fans understand. You hurt. You can't. I mean, it's just everything hurts. It's a whole thing. You play the game differently. You're more reckless because you can cut more. It's reckless. Now, Trevor, as a fan, Eagles fan, living in South Florida, what are you looking at, and what are you looking forward to seeing with this Eagles schedule?
When's the Tampa game? Because I'm going to make the trip over to 4 hours from Tampa, from Fort Lauderdale. I'm going to make that trip.
That's a home game for the Eagles. That'll be a home game.
That is my home game, anyways. And what home game I'm going to go home for? Because I have friends who want to ask me like, what game are you coming home for? I told them like either the Dolphin game or the Giant game or the 49ers game. So I'm going to make my call on that and see if my dad wants to go to the Patriot game because he wants to go up to Foxborough with the Eagle fans. So that's why. So it really depends who I want to go with. I know Tampa's a lock, a stone cold lead pipe lock, but the other two is like, do I want to go home to see homies or go home and be with my dad and go to an Eagle game?
Yeah, the only problem with Foxborough is you're outside the city. I don't think people really understand how nice it is to get a hotel downtown, hop on the subway, Uber, whatever. Foxborough's a little bit of a haul. We joined practice against them this year when the bloodbath fight happened when it was a melee. I was sadly not in pads because that's like my favorite thing to do because I just want to be a hockey player and just brawl. But I digress. Now, Jason, I guess as we're on the schedule talk, you look at that 82 game schedule of the Flyers. You obviously work for the franchise, shows around it. What are you looking at on the 82 game schedule? Because the NFL is 18 weeks, 17 games.
Yeah, well, first of all, on the NFL thing, the first thing I think of when I think of the NFL schedule being released is the worst next 2 or 3 days of sports radio you will ever hear. Because everybody calling, I got them going 14-3. They're going to win, lose this one, blah, blah, blah. Give them a win, dog. What you got? Anthony get all hyped up over this schedule. It's like, oh my God, this is just absolutely absurd.
Yeah.
I mean, it's fun.
The one down here in Miami is how many Giant fans or Cowboy fans will be at those the Giant and Cowboy games in Miami? That's the big one down here.
So yeah, I dreaded doing those sports radio shows for years. Where like, what do you got them doing? What games do you start? It's
week 3. You got them losing in in Dallas.
To the Cowboys. So that whole thing. But
6-1-0.
The NHL schedule. I mean,
6-3-2.
I mean, it's almost overwhelming. I mean, you're looking at 82 games. It's like, Jesus. You look at to see how many back-to-backs there are, when the late night after dark games are, the 10:30s, a long homestand or a long road trip. You look at those and how tough they are. But there's so much ebbs and flows to a season. I mean, even in the 17-game NFL season, there's just so much ebb and flow to it. In pro sports, the margin is so fine that I'm a firm believer that a lot of times it's not who you play, it's when you play them. So, if you're playing a team and you're on 3 days rest and in the NHL and the other team's just they're playing their fourth game in 6 nights and they're on the road. I mean, those are huge advantages. So you got to look at all those things. But I mean, ultimately, it all ends up being the same for every team for the most part. But if you play on the East Coast, your travel is a lot easier than it would be. I mean, if you play in Winnipeg, like you don't sleep in your bed a whole heck of a lot during the season. You play in New York or Philly or Boston, in the Northeast corridor, you're home way more. So it's a big difference. So, yeah, I mean, I just start counting down the days of the season. I'm ready for it already. But, the NFL one with sports radio over the next week after that's every show's got to do it too, right? Like the previous 2 shows just did that whole exercise. Now we're going to do it. Like we're going to reveal something spectacular. But that's sports radio in a nutshell.
Yeah, that's how it sells. Now we got to sadly transition to the NBA, which to me is either great or an absolute bore fest. But Trevor, you're down, and then we got to ask Dan about his Golden State Warriors, see how they're doing. Trevor, what is going on in South Florida, man? I mean, Eric Spoelstra, Jimmy Buckets. What's the word? What's your thoughts on the entire playoffs?
Eric Spoelstra is like Pete Carroll. He finds a way to win. He doesn't he does not mess with the rotation. That's what me and my buddy Vlad have considered. He's like the Pete Carroll of the NBA. He figures them out how to win, finds these diamonds in the rough G League, Pac-12, WAC conference players or Mountain West players. He finds a way to put them in the perfect spot and gets them to win. And it's if you're an 8 seed and you're in South Florida, there's no pressure at all down here. And it's like, they're upsetting everybody. It doesn't matter if you're the Boston Bruins or the Milwaukee Bucks, and they're probably going to gentlemen sweep the guys of the New York Knicks anyways. So it's going to be the third time the Heat are in the Eastern Conference Final of Jimmy Butler era anyways. It's a wild time right now down here in South
Jimmy
Florida.
Buckets, man, from Philly to, and it didn't work out, and they went a different direction, and that fell on its face, and yeah, good for him. It's also the effect of Dwayne Wade going to Chicago and telling Jimmy, come down to South Florida for a winning culture. Yeah, that's a good point too. It's good insider knowledge there. Yeah. Now, Dan, what happened, man? I mean, the Lakers barely made the playoffs, and now your Golden State Warriors, all this depth and all this scoring, but no moxie inside. They're about to get knocked off by Grandpa James.
Their problems of the regular season are they haven't solved them. Like, it's been a problem all year. I mean, they're the first championship team to have. I mean, they won 9 games on the road this year. They were 9-33 in the road, which is the worst ever for a defending champion. And like their depth isn't what it usually is. They usually have great depth. Their depth just isn't the same, and they haven't figured it out. And then it was apparent like last night, Steph Curry, 31-point triple double, and he's got. You rely on Clay. I don't know, for some reason, Clay this series has just been hit or miss. And Jordan Poole has been awful. I mean, I don't know if he got his bag and just was like, you know what, I'm done. I mean, but he hasn't even showed up. I mean, last night he's had 0 points. He was turning the ball over left and right. Like I see this thing on Twitter, and it's always trending that when Jordan Poole gets in the game, and it's like in quotation marks, and it's like Jordan Poole is like, look what I can do. And he goes like, I don't know, he just does like a 360 layup, throws it off the backboard, and it's bad basketball. And then they just haven't figured it out. And I don't know if, in my mind as a Warriors fan, it's like, oh well, they had LeBron 3-1 in the finals, came back and beat them. So maybe this is like a setup for like Curry's got his chance to get his 3-1 revenge on LeBron. I don't know. They got 2 out of 3 at home, so we'll see if they can make it a series. But it's last night was ugly.
How do you think the whole NBA playoffs unfold, Trevor?
I think it's going to be either Celtics Sixers. I think Celtics are going to outlast the Sixers. Sorry, I think it's going to be Celtics Heat. I think the Celtics are the main team, but I think the Heat are so hot. I think it's going to be Heat in the NBA Finals, which is gonna be a fun time, anyways. But West, I think it's pretty wide open and stuff. So
the
I
Panthers
think
and the Heat rocking and rolling. Jason,
out of stuff going on down here is gonna be wild.
What are your thoughts here on the NHL playoffs? Obviously, you got Florida knocking on the doorstep. The team in Dallas is pretty good. What do you think?
Yeah, it's been weird because some teams look really good at one point, and then all of a sudden they kind of hit a tough spot, like Dallas. Like Ottinger's been great all year and for them in goal, and he's not playing great right now. And Grubauer sucked all year, couldn't stop a beach ball for Seattle, but he's playing great now in the playoffs. And so much of it's confidence. You see the same thing in Florida with Bobrovsky. I mean, my good buddy Alex Lyon, the Yale alum, is the backup now in Florida, and he played the last 8 games of the regular season. He really got him into the playoffs. And I texted him and I said, "Did you manage to do something that not many people can do? You managed to sit $10 million on the bench." And that Bobrovsky wasn't playing in those really important games, and Lyon went on a heater. But Bobrovsky's playing great now, so you got to wonder if he can stay in the groove. But I expect Florida to sweep and send Toronto packing, and we'll see what kind of changes happen there, whether Dubas gets let go or Sheldon Keefe, or what kind of changes they make, because they got to make changes. Been doing the same thing for years and getting no result. And then, Edmonton's the interesting one to me. I mean, they got boat raced last night, 5-1. Draisaitl's just been unbelievable. He had 6 goals in the first 2 games of the series. I mean, he's just an animal. But
Unreal.
Yeah, I mean, he's incredible. But they can't defend good enough, so I don't think they're going to advance past Vegas. But I really like Florida in the final right now. I think it'd be Florida and Seattle. Not really an NHL dream scenario from a marketing perspective, let me tell you.
Opposite sides of the world.
Yeah.
Really.
There's someone had a
but
ticket
Seattle
for
in
them.
year 2, like they've stunk in year 1. And when they had their expansion draft, I was like, what the hell is Ron Francis trying to build here?
All line, it's like one big second and third line, right? I mean,
yeah,
no fourth line.
Yeah,
you brought that up, Jason, about the Flyers. Like, and if the problem is the East is so good too, like really good.
Yeah.
So if you can't keep pace with this high flying the East in the regular season, you're even if you have the guys in the moxie to do it in the playoffs, you're not even going to make it. Now, if they can get there next year, should be interesting what they can do. Trav, you're going to jump in.
Yeah, I was going to say, like, if you're I know someone put a $5 future bet for the Stanley Cup final for Panthers Kraken. They could stand to win $38,000, by the way.
Wow. That's not bad. I mean, the thing is this too, like, the NHL, like for years, the NBA was the same way. The old joke was, well, everybody in the NHL makes the playoffs. You know why? Because pretty much everybody did.
Mm-hmm.
16 teams made the playoffs in a 21-team league. So 5 teams missed out. It wasn't many. But now it's a 32-team league, so half in, half out. And you look at teams that make a big jump and, have a lot of talent, like the New York Rangers. They were great last year. This year, they got bumped in the first round. Panarin played awful in the playoffs. Shesterkin was good, but Gerard Gallant, who must be a real pain in the ass behind the scenes because he wins everywhere, but has like a 2-year tenure everywhere he goes. So he's just got to be a nightmare to deal with or something. But
it's a great roster if you're a head coach sitting in the weeds. Like,
no, it is and it isn't though. It's a tricky one because you got like young players that were taken at the top of the draft, and Lafreniere is the number 1 overall, and Kako. Getting through to those guys and then getting through to your stars, it's hard. And working in the New York market, like Dan, you played there. That is no bargain. It isn't. A lot of teams wouldn't have fired Gallant after this year, but New York, they zipped him right away. So.
Different animal.
Yeah, it's a whole different thing. It's like the Northeast personified on steroids. The pressure that comes with New York. So, I don't know where that team goes. I think they'll make some big moves, but should they? Is the question.
Would they be surprised if they go for Andrew Burnett, who's a Devils assistant coach, who was the Panthers' old coach as well, for the head coach for the Rangers? You think?
Yeah, it could be an option for sure. I mean, it's going to be interesting now that the lottery's over. You can kind of see where some of the pieces may fall in regards to some of the coaching vacancies and who's out there, and who's going to be the hot assistant that moves up, or who's going to be, there's always a coach that gets hired that you're kind of like, oh, well, I didn't see that coming, because you see these big names that are out there. But I can assure you, it's not going to be Alain Vigneault going back to New York. I would think that's what say.
Now I'm going to ask this question to everybody on the panel here. I'll start with Jason, and I'm going to go around by their teams here. If you were to pick one player for the Flyers to sign, if they had the cap space to do it, and they had to go get it, to add to that team that you think would really drive things for him?
What,
Somewhat realistic, maybe. Yeah, sure. But I thought like
could be a coach.
You see. I don't think he's. Yeah. Well, you see, like my point of it is, I saw what Florida did. They said, you know what, we got to get tougher. We got to be grittier. I don't care about winning the President's Trophy. We need to be a team that can be a pain in the ass to play against. And they went and got Kachuk, and I mean, holy shit. So, like, if there's a guy in the NHL right now that you would put on the Flyers to say, you know what, I think that player would A, bring in some maybe older free agents that'd be attractive, and B, you know, I guess if you had your wish list and also somewhat realistic, combine those together, who's that guy for the Flyers?
Well, I mean, the free agent class, like where they are right now, I don't think the free agent class and them shopping high price tag players is the right thing to do right now, because they got to go through, you know, there's steps you got to take before you get to that point, from both a fiscal perspective, you know, cap wise. They're getting healthier cap wise, but they're still not healthy. So you can't commit to an older player, and the player's got a fifth timeline. So I'm not dipping into the free agent market to try and get some big name that's well beyond his best years in the league. You know, I don't want to do that. I mean, the only things that I would look at would be more trade type things. And, you know, if a player like Brady Tkachuk makes it known that he's not going to extend in Ottawa, then when that time comes, I do what I can to get a Brady Tkachuk. He's not as good as Matthew Tkachuk. He's just not quite as skilled, but I think he's equally as disruptive, and it would be a legend in this town. So that's a guy that I would be keeping an eye on. And then you have the other ones too. You know, what happens in Toronto? Can you go in there and pick some of the pieces away because they got to make changes? You know, having the 4 stars doesn't work. So are they willing to move on from a Marner? Matthews' deal is going to come up. I think he's going to end up in Arizona. Or same thing with Edmonton. You know, how are you going to use, you know, your depth that you have? Because that's one thing the Flyers do have as organizational equity. So, but I'm not looking to splash anything right now. I'm not trading the goaltender. I'm not going to trade him. He's 24, unless I know that he doesn't want to be patient through a rebuild. And I think that decision will be made during next season for him. I think he is questioning it a little bit in my conversations with him, but I'm not going big price tag shopping right now. I don't think it's the right time to do it. It's just like last year, I didn't think it was the right time to go get Johnny Gaudreau. I don't need to put a sports car in my driveway when I got plumbing issues and electrical issues in my house. You know what I mean? Not the time to get, you know, heated travertine floors in the bathroom and get a luxury piece like a Gaudreau when you're not ready for it. It's structural things you got to take care of first.
It's really great points. And I love your point of, hey, guy gets frustrated, I'm not going to resign here. You're going to see that. There's going to be 3 or 4 guys that's going to happen.
Timeline.
Okay.
Yeah. You got to make the same timeline. Like a guy asked Carter about it, and I flat out asked him, I said, you know, how do you feel about a rebuild? Like, no player wants to hear our team's in a rebuild, you know, because no player wants to have an inferior roster on the field of play. And you have
a shot clock on your body.
Yeah. I mean, because you got one career. Like, your organizational timeline doesn't match up with my timeline, because I got one shot at this to do 2 things: win as much as I can and make as much dough as I can. and if I win and I perform, and I'm in a good place to perform with a good coach and a good system for you guys, a good quarterback to get me the ball that can be protected by a good offensive line, you're going to make more money. So you got one shot at it. So I don't think players like to hear that.
Would you be surprised if Carter Hart asked for a trade to Edmonton because they need a goalie? Stuart Skinner's like can't catch a beach ball. Think about it.
Or Toronto.
Well, I mean, I don't know if he'd want to play in his hometown, to be honest with you. Like, that's a whole myth in sports.
That's a nightmare.
Yeah. I mean, I would never want to. Everybody assumed Mike Trout, when he came up, was going to come back and save the Phillies, right? He wanted to go to every Eagle game and get all those touchdown footballs from Carson Wentz, but he didn't want any part of playing there. You know, you're like, I'm not going to shit where I eat here. I'm not going to ruin my hometown. You know, some players do want it, like Tony DeAngelo wanted to. Some players do want to, but I think it's rare. It just
at the back end of your career, I think it's good.
Yeah, it's as a thing to check.
Yeah, like, you know what? I was home. It's good for my mom and dad. You know, I bought a house on the Jersey Shore, like DeAngelo. Like, that's a cool thing.
Yeah.
You know, for me, I went to the Giants. That was a nightmare. I mean, it was great. Don't get me wrong. I shouldn't even say it was a nightmare, but After practice, it'd be like 25 people at practice. Instead of me going to the cold tubs and eating lunch and getting ready for the second half of training camp day, I'm hanging out with people for like an hour, and it's like, it's cool and it's amazing. But when you're an older player, like,
you don't got the hour of bandwidth to spare.
Yeah, you have a way different. You have a way. I wasn't on the team yet, so I want to ask Dan this. And then I'll go to Trev. Dan, would you want to play close to home? And then also, who would you be the player that you would want Golden State to sign? I know you're a big Golden State fan.
I mean, I played as close to home as I technically could. Baltimore was right up the street. It was either Baltimore or Washington, and they're half hour, 45 minutes away. So I technically did play at home, which was nice. I mean, it was easy for everybody to come to games. Which is nobody was ever bothering me about. I mean, I had friends that lived in the DC area, but nobody was really coming to watch any practices or hang out. But it was good in a sense where a lot of people could make it to games, but then, as you know, that costs you a little bit of money because you got to buy all these tickets for people, and home game tickets aren't the cheapest either. So I technically did play about as close as home as I could. But to kind of point that Jason had made, and I was talking about where you don't want to be part of a rebuild, because you want to make as much money as you can. I don't know if Colin, if you ever felt this but in free agency in football, I feel like teams want to pick players from good teams, right? Like I've been a free agent where I was on a 3-14 Bears team, and and there wasn't a lot of interest, right? And I had a pretty decent year that year, and there just wasn't a lot of interest because it's bad. It's a bad team. Unless you're the top 5 on that bad team, nobody's really looking to pick off that team. And then all of a sudden, in 18, I didn't play as much as I did the year before, but it's a 12-4 Bears team who made it to the playoffs. And all of a sudden, free agency, the second wave of free agency, there's 3 or 4 teams calling who want to schedule you for a visit because you've been on that winning team. They kind of want to bring in the culture. Like, yeah, you're a good player, but maybe you can add a little something. You're kind of getting to be like a veteran. Can you bring something from a winning culture to a not so winning culture? So I thought that was a good point. And that, I don't know if you've ever experienced that or felt that, but teams want players from like winning teams.
That's a great point. I mean, look at Kansas City, look at Tampa Bay Lightning, right?
And people are more willing to, people are, more willing to go, people will take less to go to a team that's winning as well. Like, you see it all the time. Some people, you get towards the end of their career, they want to, not say they're ring chasing, but they want a better chance to win. So they're going to take less to go to a team that, that's winning.
Hell yeah. Losing's miserable.
Yeah,
miserable. And everyone like hates their coach when you ever notice like losing teams, like that coach sucks. Well, does he suck or like our team sucks? It's a little bit of combination of both, I think, but lots to digress. And we wrap things up. I got to ask Trevor now.
Yeah.
And you have a Cubs hat on. You cover freaking every team in South Florida. You're a huge Eagles fan. I can't track to pick your team and who would be your person that you want to bring on.
So I'm a Flyer fan, but it's like right now I watch the Panthers they pay my bills, so I root for them to do well. For the Flyers,
absolutely.
I love to see Tage Thompson or Alex Tuck.
Ooh,
Tage Thompson. Tage Thompson's been. I've seen him play like in person.
Trade? Yeah, Buffalo's going to make that trade for what? How many first-round picks?
Yeah. They need like 5 first-round picks out of it. That's a problem. But I like those 2 players.
No rules. What was your second one again?
I said Tage Thompson and Alex Tuck. They got from they got Tuck from the Vegas deal from Jack Eichel and stuff.
Yeah. Interesting.
They're both young guys. I feel like we need some young, juvenated, like current players that want to play the speed and seal game, which the Flyers desperately need.
So, Jason, it sounds like the Flyers are going to maybe the closest thing they can do is go to like a Seattle model.
Well, I don't think they're going Seattle model. I think they're just going to keep building with depth and use the the assets they have to flip guys into the right timeline, people that fit the timeline so that they can kind of ascend at the same time. That's where you get asked questions about guys like Provorov and Konechny. Like Konechny had a great year. Coach loves him, but do you move him while he has peak value? Because he's got 2 years on his contract too. So it's team trades for a guy that's under control, $5.5 million per. So that's extreme value in what is still kind of technically a flat cap world. So what you do with those players. It's easy to go, oh, guy's 31, he's not going to fit our timeline. Let's try and trade him. I mean, that's beyond obvious. But it's those guys in that 24 to 28 range that you go, okay, do they fit? And when we're ready to win again, what are they when they at that point? And then you got to look at their contract and go, like the whole thing's a puzzle, right? You have the puzzle of putting the pieces together on the field of play that have to work together. You have the pieces from a cultural standpoint in the locker room and how they handle themselves as pros. And then you have the fiscal piece of it too, that you got to fit together. Like the NFL the same way, like NFL's different in the sense so that you can just send a guy packing and it's not guaranteed, but those things are hard. You're making commitments that you can't get out of. There's no get out of jail free card. So you got to figure all that out. I mean, they got the young guys like Tippett and Cates and some of those guys that I think are definitely going to be a part of it, probably Frost, but you got to supplement and you got to see what Cutter Gauthier is, another year at BC. I think he's going to be a good player, what you get in this draft. And, you do have some other pieces. They haven't drafted poorly. They just haven't drafted at the top. They get a guy like Denway in the 5th round. He's going to be an NHL player this year. He's going to be a 4th-line center. You get that in the 5th round, you get about like a 1.8% chance of making the NHL if you're drafted in the 5th round. So that's a good pick. And there's other guys in there as well that will be a part of it. But it's a tough thing to piece together, and that's why the GM gets paid the big bucks. So good luck to Danny.
Is there a way that they can buy out probably or move Cam Atkinson? Or what are they going to do with Couturier since he hasn't played in 2 years? That's a big thing.
Yeah, I mean, if Couturier is a big one, Atkinson, I mean, you could buy him out. I don't think it makes sense to do that because then you're spreading out your cap pain for a longer term.
Yeah,
and I don't want to do that. But Couturier, I mean, that's obviously a big one. He hasn't played since December of 2021, and he's got 7 years left on a contract. I mean, if he never plays again, you LTIR him, but that's a hassle too because you can only go 10% over the cap, and he's not on LTIR in the offseason. So, and if he does come back, what is he? Is he 80% of what he was? Is he 100%? He's also 30 years old, 29 years old now. So it's a huge question mark. Yeah, it's weird because he's a player that wasn't injury prone.
No.
And then and it's a back. Like the back is fucking scary, right?
Yeah. He's such a massive puzzle piece for them. Obviously, I know that's not a groundbreaking statement, but if he gets it grooving again, you get a guy like Cam back.
Yeah,
I mean, they would be okay. They'd be okay. They would be solid.
Really good play. I always used to say when he was here and Hacksaw was here, whenever they were, kind of struggling as a team, they were, you knew the line changes were coming. They were going to try new combinations. There was always a line of players out the door of the coach saying, "I want to play on his line," because he just made everybody better. And he took up so much responsibility of all the crap you don't want to do as a player. So that's a big thing. It's a big element.
Anything from you there, Triple D, before we wrap things up?
No.
Triple D is Dilfy Dan's Detailing, by the way, sponsored by Not For Long Media. If you need your car cleaned in Annapolis, Dan's your guy.
Yep.
Trev, anything, brother?
It's a great time to be in South Florida if you're a South Florida sports fan. The Heat are doing well. The Panthers are going cup crazy down here. So the bandwagon's open for the Panthers. If anyone wants to join, I'd like to say Colin and Jason.
I'm an NHL free agent, so maybe I'll hop on.
Dan, come on. Anyways, more.
I've had a lot of people say I'm an NFL free agent.
Yeah.
I've had some NFL people. I've had some people say to me, I'm an NHL free agent. Excuse me, and I'm like, join the Flyers, but I can't even make the argument. I told one guy this year, I'm like, you should pick the Bruins this year. Just jump on with them, bro. Just go all in.
The best teams in the regular season don't win cups, though.
I know, but I'm saying they'll put the assets behind winning, and I feel like they're gonna have a strong culture in place.
Yeah,
Flyers right now.
Bergeron's retiring though. That's a huge piece.
I know they're on the way down. Don't get me wrong, but
yeah,
I was a little down in the dumps about the Fly Boys. So, boys, thanks for coming on. Fun one. Talked a little bit of everything, and going to a game this year. Promo code Colin Thompson, GEEK, baby. Check them out. Jason Myrtetus, Trevor Harris, Daniel Brown. Thanks for tuning into the Colin Thompson Show, guys.
Cheers.
Appreciate it.